we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time listening, welcome. If not, welcome back. If you haven't yet, please contact the podcast if you ever want to reach out and let us know a topic or give us any comments or let us know how we're doing. You can check us out on our Instagram. Check us out on our Twitter at the Bigmark Podcast, at the Bigmark Pod. You can support the podcast at the Patreon, at the patreon.com/BigmarkPod. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't yet. You know, tell your friends. Please spread the word. You know, again, I know we cover a lot of topics on here, so you know, everyone has always asked, you know, what's the Bigmark Podcast all about? What do you actually do? You know, what kind of topics, whatever. And, you know, I always have to say, listen, it's about everything. It's about everything and anything. And, again, that's just kind of what I'm interested in and how my mind kind of works. And it's a little bit of an adventure, and you never know. And we might go on tangents, but hey, you know, I probably would have called this podcast Tangentially Speaking, but that's already been taken by Dr. Chris Ryan. So shout out Dr. Chris Ryan. I know you're listening. Anyway, not to go on a tangent. Today I wanted to talk about folk music. I wanted to talk about a lot of things, but specifically I want to jump off this awesome documentary, concert film. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's called Another Day, Another Time. It's fucking amazing. I love it. I've watched it. I can't tell you how many times. It turned me on to a lot of cool new bands. It, you know, opened my eyes a little bit more to the folk scene, even the more contemporary folk scene as well. But anyway, in a little bit about the background here, and we'll kind of get into things. So, in September 2013, some musicians who had worked on a movie together assembled for a concert, along with some guests. The movie was Inside Lewin Davis, a story about a folk singer in Greenwich Village in 1961. The music in the movie was produced by T-Bone Burnett, and he also produced a concert. It was held in New York City's Town Hall. So, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, you know, when you bring artists together to do music for a movie, I doubt many times do they ever meet each other, let alone if they're actually recording music for the movie. And I believe when they did this movie, a lot of the artists that helped record the songs were actually artists in the movie, because it's a movie about musician. A musician is a movie about musicians. And again, I think it's a really interesting concept. And, you know, it's funny with certain movies, superficially, you know, when you watch them, they're like, okay, whatever. But when you start to learn about all the background and everything that went into it, it adds to the movie so much. I guess that's why it's an art form, is that there's so many different influences that actually, inform your decision about whether the movie is good or not. Anyway, a little bit about the movie. So again, like I said, it was released in 2013. A little about Inside Lewin Davis, the movie Inside Lewin Davis. We'll get to Another Day, Another Time, obviously, in a minute. But a little bit about Inside Lewin Davis. So it was released in 2013. It's a black comedy written, directed, and produced by Joel and Ethan Coen. The Coen brothers, tremendous. I love them. I love basically all their movies. Some of them haven't been right spot on, but not everything's going to be a knockout of the park. There's something really interesting about their movies. I don't know what it is. Most of them, they're like this snapshot into people's lives. You know, we're talking Fargo, we're talking The Big Lebowski, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, all these phenomenal movies where you kind of come into an ongoing story and then you kind of leave and the story's still happening and you're kind of left almost a little bit uneasy, but at the same time, just like you felt the Coen brothers somehow achieve a level of intimacy, which is very interesting in movies. Inside Lewin Davis is set in 1961, like I mentioned before, and it follows 1 week in the life of Lewin Davis, played by Oscar Isaac, who is a folk singer struggling to achieve musical success while keeping his life and integrity in order. This is actually Oscar Isaac's probably his breakthrough role. Tremendous actor. He was in some other movies before, but this was kind of the big role that brought him into fame, I guess if you want to say it that way. He was in one of the new Star Wars movies. He was in Dune, tremendous. He was in Ex Machina, which is really good. I think this might have been right around that same time. Ex Machina. Anyway, tremendous actor, does a really good job, plays the guitar and sings in the movie and in the documentary as well, which is very cool. Also starring in Inside Lewin Davis, we got Carey Mulligan, John Goodman, also a big Coen Brothers actor. They tend to work with a lot of the same actors in a lot of their movies, which is very cool. I love when directors do that. Garrett Hedlund, he was in Four Brothers and Troy and a bunch of other movies. F. Murray Abraham, he was in Amadeus. Justin Timberlake and Adam Driver. Everyone is tremendous in this. And again, obviously having Justin Timberlake in there, he's a great actor and can sing too, right? So it's perfect for the part. But I won't go too far into that movie. Check that movie out. Inside Lewin Davis by the Coen Brothers. It's probably on Netflix and everything. But again, it's one of those movies where you kind of get to see into the life of a struggling artist. Anyway, someone really trying to make a living on their art, and like I mentioned before, it's a struggle for him to keep his life together, but also to keep his integrity. And there's points in the movie, not to spoil anything, but there's points where he could probably make some money and get it, get himself ahead a little bit if he would put at least his perceived artistic integrity aside. And that happens with a lot of musicians and artists and anybody who, that no one wants to sell out. No one wants to do any of that. No one wants to, again, put up their own integrity to make a dollar. But, a lot of people do in that way, and that's the thing. And kind of your integrity is kind of based on your definition of it. So, what can you do? A little bit more about T-Bone Burnett. So he obviously produced Another Day, Another Time, which we're talking about today. But he's basically been involved in everything the Coen Brothers have done up until this point. He's an American record producer, musician, and songwriter. He gained fame as a guitarist in Bob Dylan's band in the 70s. So I guess after the band left Bob Dylan, T-Bone came in, which is very cool. He's won multiple Grammys for film music, which, like I said, he's done all the Coen Brothers movies. He also won Grammys for Walk the Line, Crazy Heart, Cold Mountain, Oh Brother Where Art Thou? And he also won another Grammy for producing Raising Sand, which is Alison Krauss and Robert Plant's little project that they did there. Very cool album. If you haven't heard that, go check that out. T-Bone Burnett arranged the concert and brought together the artists. He basically, all the artists he brought together were the artists that did work on Inside Lewin Davis, like I mentioned, but also some other guests, like I said, artists that T-Bone has worked with in the past, artists that just kind of make sense that were actually from that folk era. Again, having the artists that were from the film also play their music live is very cool. It's obviously very rehearsed because they had to do it for the movie, and then bringing in these other really cool artists just to kind of mix things up. And his whole idea is he wanted to showcase not only the music from Inside Lewin Davis, but also music kind of surrounding the folk scene in New York City in the 60s. Because again, it was a phenomenon, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more. Essentially, T-Bone's T-Bone's goal was to create an experience that could be had around a campfire, but in town hall. Again, bring that intimacy, let people kind of feel like they're being brought together. The power of the folk movement in the 60s, like I mentioned, it kind of made downtown New York America's campfire. That's where everything was coming, all these songs. And again, folk, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. Folk is, again, it's folk, it's for the folk, it's for the people. It's there to be played, it's there to be shared. And actually a very interesting way of disseminating information. You can really get a lot of info out in these songs and allow, whether it's political or just like kind of like, just uplifting kind of songs that people can all sing together and maybe make them feel a little bit better, or at least feel something in that moment. Anyway, so again, this whole kind of campfire aspect in downtown, a lot of the stuff was very acoustic. Everyone's kind of singing around one mic most of the time. Very, very cool. The artist who performed, obviously, it's interesting doing a podcast on a concert, essentially, because obviously we're not going to be playing any of the music. But again, I encourage you to go check out this documentary. Probably watch the movie first and then go watch the documentary. Anyway, some of the artists that performed included the Punch Brothers, which are a tremendous contemporary folk band. Their lead singer, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. The lead singer of the Punch Brothers, he's a tremendous mandolin player. Like probably one of the best mandolin players out there right now. I guess I don't know how many are out there. And again, I'm not as well versed in the folk scene, which is really interesting. And I'll kind of segue into that in a second. But his name is Chris Teal, I think Chris Teal from the Punch Brothers. Again, tremendous artists, all of them. And again, I'm not as well versed with the new bands and that kind of folk scene right now, but because I've been starting to do stuff with my boys, shout out Trev, shout out Lore, shout out John Harley. We're doing our no name folk super group kind of thing, and it's been really fun, and it's something very new for me. I haven't really explored that genre very much. I love listening to it, but again, it's very fun and it's very interesting. It's very new. So a lot of these newer bands I'm not as fluent with, so bear with me, people. Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings, they have amazing performances. Willie Watson joins them for a couple. The Milk Carton Kids, so this is one of the bands I hadn't heard ever before, and it's a duo, and oh my god, like when you listen to them, Marcus Mumford, who's kind of around in this documentary, talks about them in some of his interviews, and he says, it's amazing listening to these guys sing, because you can't really tell who's singing, and that's beautiful and that's probably the utmost compliment when you're singing with someone and singing harmonies, is that no one can really tell who's singing. You guys are so in sync, and it's beautiful. They have some amazing performances. Lake Street Dive does a song, and that's actually the first time I ever heard Lake Street Dive. Tremendous band, really solid music school band from out west, I believe. Anyway, I'll do a whole podcast on them. God bless. Lake Street Dive, just really good band. Patti Smith came out for a couple songs. Colin Malloy from the Decemberists does a great little performance. The Avett Brothers, really solid band. They have a really cool story. They actually were like a metal hardcore band before, and then they became this folk. It's two brothers, but they have a whole band with them, which is really cool. Jack White of the White Stripes, the Jack White. Rhiannon Giddens, she's a tremendous singer, obviously classically trained, but her performances are really moving because she does like traditional Gaelic songs. They kind of show that Gaelic, Celtic, whatever you want to call it, music. They show that influence, how much it really did have an effect on the folk scene in America. Obviously the folk scene being a lot of Irish and English immigrants, and also just the colonial people who have been there forever. Their kind of music that and there's been different waves of immigration and all that different stuff and all these different influences. And in fact, like African folk, if you could consider that, became the blues in southern United States too, and the both eventually became rock and roll. Anyway, Oscar Isaac does a performance, like I mentioned before, who stars as Lewin Davis in the movie. Joan Baez, like I said, someone actually from the folk movement in the 60s, came and did a performance with Marcus Mumford. Marcus Mumford also does a couple beautiful songs. Such a good singer. Anyway, very, very cool. Again, it's an interesting documentary because it's still a documentary, but it is a concert. I mean, all those kind of concert films, they tend to have that kind of documentary aspect, whether it's like The Last Waltz or Shine a Light. Song Remains the Same is a little bit more, not so much documentary, but at least like a film in between. So again, these are the things that make doing a podcast about this interesting. But without saying too much, without spoiling things, again, I just think the transitions between interviews and the performances, they would do these kind of cool transitions between the live performances and then the rehearsals that they were doing in the studio before they were doing the performance itself. Again, interviews are one thing, but they got to be good interviews too. They, especially in a movie as such, they're not necessarily giving away too much information. It's more so, they're kind of trying to get a feel of how the musicians felt about things. And again, just really, really interesting stuff. So go check that movie out and let me know. But yeah, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about folk music in the sense that, like I mentioned before, it's our music for folk. It's a lot of the songs we learn early on tend to be folk songs, songs that we can all sing together. A lot of entry level guitar songs. Most of the songs are really easy. They're not really complicated songs. And again, the whole idea, like I mentioned before, it is to bring people together and to sing them. And hey, this will be a whole podcast on itself, but the history of music, a lot of reasons why we do sing together and play music together is that we can all experience that same thing at the same time. It also helps reinforce ideas because it's repetitive singing and you're all singing together and you're hearing it and you're listening, and it kind of becomes a mantra in some ways. Music has kind of been there also to kind of pass the time in certain aspects or keep things in rhythm. And again, the use of music throughout history has been a little bit more utilitarian than than we consider it today. It's not just like kind of background noise just for fun. And again, folk music, includes a lot of people, and Pete Seeger, without going into too much background about him, was a major folk star, and essentially bringing in the modern folk or bringing in folk to the masses in a certain sense. This land is your land and things like that, where there was actually a political aspect to some of it, and bringing that and disseminating that through the American people, kind of gave them hope or gave them ideas of better things or bigger things or other things that maybe they hadn't necessarily thought of due to the climate, due to what's happening, things coming out of the Great Depression and what have you. Anyway, the coolest thing about folk music is that whether you're bandmates or strangers, you can kind of like figure out these songs and play together. And I think that's a really cool thing that, you go, oh, these are all just the same songs. Everyone knows them. They're all so simple and stuff. It's like, yeah, they're simple, but at the same time, that leaves a lot of room for your own flair. Each person's going to sing a song a little bit different. They're going to approach a harmony slightly different. The way they play their instrument, the rhythms, the this, the that. As much as we can say, oh, it's monotonous, oh, it's the same thing over and over, at the end of the day, the beauty lies in the fact that there are slight differences. As much as it sounds on the surface, it looks similar. If you do dive down and you look into it, there are subtle differences or different ways artists choose to do those things, which therein lies the beauty. You know, it's almost like, look at Warhol, what Warhol did with some of his mass production things. Yeah, it looks all the same over and over again, but if you really kind of look closely, you see differences and you see patterns, or you see how there is beauty in those subtleties. Not necessarily on the surface, and that's why some people aren't necessarily into kind of folk music, because it sounds boring or whatever. But when you hear different people do these folk standards, if you will, again, you get to appreciate their flair in a sense. Another obviously really cool thing about folk music is basically rock and roll came from the meeting of blues and folk. So like I said, you know, blues kind of coming out of African American culture and slave culture and all that they were doing, and bringing that and kind of adding it with the folk culture, putting those two things together and trying to find the best of both worlds there created the genre of rock and roll. And, you know, obviously you got to give props to folk for that forever. And there's always this really interesting connection between folk and punk. Actually, Colin Malloy in the documentary talks about it, but, you know, he says, and he references Pete Seeger again, you know, it's all about, let's get as many people singing these songs. You know, like I said, spread the word, get this info out. You know, the songs are easy to play. It's 3 chords. They're for everybody. They want everyone playing it. And essentially that's the punk ethos. It doesn't matter how good you are at playing it. Just play it. Just go out there and do your thing and be part of something that's bigger than you. You know what I mean? There should never be an element of exclusivity in folk music, which I thought was a really interesting point, from the documentary, in the sense that, no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, you should feel that there is a connection to folk music. You shouldn't worry about, you know, the place you come from or who you hang out with or what they like. Again, you know, and this goes for any style of music. You know, you could be from some other town and feel a connection to some type of music so deeply that it doesn't matter. But, you know, with folk music, as a musician, it's really interesting, and I'm so excited to continue to pursue, you know, what we're doing with the band. And it's exposing. It's quiet. It's acoustic. You know, there's not much to hide behind. You know, I loved playing in a band and making things big and enjoying that. And not to say that it's something to hide behind, but you can kind of make mistakes here and there. And at the end of the day, not everyone's going to necessarily notice, but it's wonderful. It's going to make, you know, hopefully it's going to make me a better musician. It makes people a better musician the more you get after it. And we're singing together in the band stuff, which is super fun. And again, I think I'm all about cross training when it comes to anything, whether it's sports or whether it's music or whether it's life. I think the more, you know, like Morimoto Musashi says, if you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything. Very cool. I think, again, that's the way we should all approach life, is be open-minded and try new things and you know, kind of see how it goes. And, you know, when we first started doing this with John Harley and the boys, you know, I mentioned before, you know, I was kind of feeling bummed out about what happened with the last bands and everything, and feeling a little bit more open-minded as far as things go. And, you know, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful to be a part of this. And again, you know, it's a movement. It's a style of music that, you know, it really does lend itself to learning and, again, just sharing experiences with others. And, you know, I've been hosting open mics at the brewery. Hopefully we still get to do them. Oh my God, with all these new fucking restrictions. Um, but but again, being able to come together with people and them step up on stage, and we just kind of we just whisper a couple chords to each other, and then all of a sudden you were playing a song, right? I mean, obviously it's interesting being a musician and seeing that. Obviously you get that, you think, oh, that's really cool to get it, but I think people who have never played an instrument, that's super fun to see. And it's interesting doing those open mics too, having them in Dundas. Dundas is a really musical town. You talk about folk, I mean, you talk about Canadian folk and how there's a French Canadian influence, and again, Dundas has been a community since like 1797 or something like that. So they've been around for so long, and a lot of those original townspeople were playing music, and there's a cool music hall in Dundas. And again, I think that Canadian music and Canadiana and Acadian style and all that things, when we were out there talking about John Harley, when we were with, I guess, Strathcona at the time, it would have been called, or maybe still Elixir. Anyway, when I was with one of my bands, we went out east to Cape Breton, and my God, the musicality out there was just amazing. And again, I think that just comes from the rich history of folk music out there. Cape Breton, being kind of a smaller island attached to Nova Scotia. Just as you go up the coast, it's the musical coast. And actually, even when we were in Halifax on the mainland, we went into this random bar. I think I probably told this story before. We went into this random bar, and the band playing, just doing covers and stuff, was so good. It actually turned out to be some of the members of Matt Mays' band, which was fucking mind-blowing. But again, just that history of folk music. And I know my mom's friends that she grew up with, their whole family still gets together, and whenever they have a family dinner or whatever, they all grab instruments. And whether you're actually playing guitar or whether you're playing fucking triangle or something, you're still part of the scene. And that's what folk music is that it brings people together. And like I said before, it's for the folk, it's for everybody. And again, it's only going to bring more people together, and that's what we really need these days. It's sad how much live music has been affected, over the past couple years, and I think it's one of the things that's kind of been severely overlooked, and I think people miss it more than they realize. And I think once we get live music back and happening a little bit more, people are going to get there, and they're going to start feeling that connectivity, because that's what it is. That's what music in general, whether it's folk or anything, it brings people together. The history of music is that the fact that we all used to actually be around a fucking campfire, like T-Bone Burnett tried to do in Town Hall with this concert, and was very successful at doing it. He was trying to recreate that feeling of everyone sitting around a campfire. And if you go long enough back in the history of human beings, there was a time where we all created music together. There wasn't just one person doing it. So we all have that in it. Our brains are all wired the same way. It's just certain people hone that part of their brain differently. So again, it's all about experiencing music together. And luckily, we're starting to get back. Hopefully, Omicron Persei 8, fucking bullshit, new variants don't just keep pushing things down. Hopefully, we keep getting better and keep getting closer to that herd immunity and feeling good like we should. And yeah, getting back to listening and playing and singing along to music together. There's a reason they do it in fucking church. Let's just put it that way. There's a reason why you sing hymns and choirs, because there's a feeling of connectivity there. And when you're all on the same wavelength, and there's vibrations and all that stuff, which we won't get into today. There's all that happens with music, and it's a sensory experience. And when you're actually also not only just listening to it, but also singing and creating it from your own body. Your body is the instrument. that's just a special feeling. You know, you feel that, you feel the vibrations, you feel the connectivity. Everyone's on the same page together. You know, that's the thing in life. Music is that microcosm where it's like we, in life, we're always trying to anticipate the next move. We don't really know what's coming, but in music, we do, at least for those pages that are written. We can have that sense of, I know what's happening next, and this is what's going to happen. And then when it does happen, there's this feeling of fulfillment. There's this feeling of, again, just satisfaction, right? So folk music, boys and girls, get into it, listen to it, spread the word, learn an instrument. Again, like I said, whether it's the fucking shaker or the triangle, the lute, the French horn, or a fucking guitar. Get out there, learn it, learn some folk songs. We'll all play it together. You know, again, thanks for listening. I love everybody. I love all you and everyone who's new, everyone who's old. You know, thank you again for coming back. I love doing this for you. Can't wait to get another guest. Obviously, it's been a little bit harder with all these variants and everyone tripping balls. So, you know, we got to do what we got to do, and we got to keep everyone safe, and we got to keep on keeping on, because we can't keep doing this forever. So, again, thank you again. Listen to the podcast, rate the podcast, spread the word, go and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and hope you are. If not, if you're listening, rate the podcast wherever you're listening. Subscribe, hit the bell on YouTube if you're watching. Go support the podcast, patreon.com/the Bigmark podcast. Hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Instagram. I love hearing your stories. Mikey Norman, I hear you, brother. All those topics you've told us are coming up soon. And again, go check out the documentary. Another Day, Another Time. Check out the film Inside Lewin Davis, and enjoy, everyone. Let's get together and feel all right. We'll see you soon. Peace.